We're going to hand over to Eric. We had Eric last year and he's got brought in and as a ring in an exceptional circumstance this time. And he's man enough to step right up. And he's supported by a very great woman too. And one day we'll get her speaking. Like, she's a little cheeky.
I've got nothing to say.
Yeah, just like me. And Eric's going to take us on the journey. Righto, over to you, Eric. Come on, bring it on.
All right. Well, thanks for having me again this year. Cathy's up the back there. This is us here with these. We touched on that last year. There's a few new people here. We work with, we started off with homeopathics and we've grown into all sorts of energy fields from there. Here with these have been going since 2006. So we've got a few years behind us. Start off, as I say, homeopathics, basic tools for animals and people to learn how to use homeopathics and grew. We went into muscle testing and went into a lot of different avenues as we've gone through and we've expanded. And now we work with people all over the world, all over Australia, doing remote healing work and energy work. We post remedies to most places and a lot of remote stuff. So we've sort of broken the window of just energy healers to being a bit more than that now. What I'm going to present today is probably what's happened more in the last 12 months and what led us to the point where we are now with these. We started making little energy towers and why we're doing it and why we feel it's pretty important and why it's got to that point. But yeah, so here with these for animals and everything like that. Last year, I'll have to slow down here a bit. Last year I presented this in the second talk, the map of consciousness, and we started looking at the levels of different things. I probably won't go through it too much. As you see, shame, guilt, apathy, grief, fear, desire. Where do you think society has been running for the last 10 years? And really bad in the last couple of years, it's been down in that grief and fear. And that's been driving a lot of the problems we've had. We've got to change this and get away from that. Well, desire, another word for desire is consumerism. What we've seen in the last a long time. So craving, disappointment, all that in here. So all lower energy sort of field and it's been coming from lots of different areas. We'll go into little bits and pieces of this later, but a lot of our work that we're dealing with now is how we can use this to benefit people and the healing work we do is very individualised and works specifically on people and properties and things like that. But how could we extend that to be more general and continue to keep growing in that sort of growing health and growing things? And from our learnings, we had to learn. We all talk about lifting vibration and lifting. What's it mean? How can we do it? And we can go from there.
Eric, you were saying last night or not before about a trip with Cathy to Adelaide, observing the landscape and where that was sitting on. We think that's us. The landscape was also.
Yeah, well, last year I touched on it, and the other day we did a trip from Inverell to Sydney through the Blue Mountains and back out Parks, Broken Hill and down to Adelaide. Not long after we discovered this, because I was looking for a more universal way to quantify energies and where we're at, and this is what we come across. And from Inverell all the way through, we found very little country. When you start testing country, where's it running and what's it coping at? Anywhere near 150. Very, very few blocks are anywhere near that. 175, I think, a couple of places up in the Blue Mountains in that real pristine sort of areas. Most of the rest of the country was down around that 75 to 100 hertz. All the way. and it didn't matter whether it was, we saw cultivation paddocks down at 30 hertz and struggling to have any life and survival. And this, it's hard to convert this into production ideas, but you can see why country, and if your production system's all input and there's nothing left there and it's running at 30 hertz, there's nothing there to drive that, no fuel in the tank, everything's got to be put in from the outside. And that's all this amounts to, is it's just another way to look at energies and what's happening in our environment and what's going on that has probably been left behind a bit. Kim Kiss has done a bit with Patrick on similar sort of stuff and dealing with the grief and stuff in the landscape and those sorts of things. And there's a lot of unknown trauma and stuff that's happened through the landscape over years that is holding country back. And it's not only that, and as you lift, each level you lift, there's another layer that you've got to look at and deal with. You just don't get rid of it once and it's all finished with. So that's just something else to think about. Then we tied it in with this sort of information. Now this is a sulfredo frequency, so sound frequency for healing. All these things, like 174 hertz removes pain, and you think about that in your life, but most people are running at 90, 80, 90, 100 hertz sort of thing. And some people down at 40 hertz. So you're nowhere near being able to heal, to remove a bit of pain out of your body. Influences energy field, liberates you from fear and guilt and all those sorts of things. And it's not till you get to 528, which is what we've been talking about a lot, love and things like that, is your DNA starts to repair and starts to get awaken relationships, and you get into more of that big picture stuff, like the rising of consciousness. So you look where, like most people, like country, are sitting down here in this sort of area. Now, if you look at this, you say, we can change this by living in a better state, and we can definitely make changes, but I'll just show you a couple of things that why it makes it so hard to make changes. When you play music, and you might play it for an hour, DNA repair, but that's only 1/24 of the day. So it's only a very small proportion of the day that you're actually in that state. When you're trying to live in an emotional basis of peace or joy or love, you might live there for an hour, but there's 24 hours of the day, so you're only at 600 hertz for a little while. So if it was all coming from within, you think about this fella, like little dogs, always joyful, happy, running around with a smile on their face, they've got everything supplied. But they're an epitome of living in love and light and abundance and gratitude, and they're always happy. And if we can bring it all out from within, these fellas should be way on top. There should be no load there. But if you start testing him and playing around muscle testing with that, he's only running about 80 hertz. Right? Even though he's living in that state. So we all get to the point it's a state we choose to live in that'll make the difference, but this is just highlighting that it's more than just a state you choose to live, because they choose to live in that joyful, abundant, fun, best day ever state. And that's where they live. It's just naturally like that. But in the last 50 years, you've seen with the marvels of modern medicine, dogs living in that state, better health and better nutrition, we've managed to decline an average lifespan of a dog from 14 years to 9. Right, so there's more environmental stresses that's going on, and dogs are something, they have very short generational time span. So since in the last 45 years, Roundup came out about 45 years ago, you've probably had 8 to 10 generations of dogs.
So is some of that to do with food? You're talking about an age of a dog.
Yeah, it's to do with food, it's to do with electromagnetic frequencies and environment, genetics, vaccines, medications. It's a whole picture. It's not just one aspect of, it's just where they've got to. With everything we're doing, that's where we've got to. And it's with cattle, it's with horses, it's right across the board that we're seeing a decline in the general health, and we know that. That's why we're all here looking to see what we can do. So that was more of an instance there to show you that attitude doesn't always get you to the end result. It helps, don't worry, it's a big thing, but it doesn't always get you there. So here we go, the environmental stresses. So you get your 240 volt power, all this stuff that runs around our houses and everything. And these LED lights are probably worse in some fashions. They put out other stuff. But runs at 50 to 60 hertz. So if you sit in front of a TV or sit in a house all day or a classroom and things like that, and you wonder why you've got no energy left at the end of the day, that's why. You've been surrounding yourself in an ambient energy of 50 to 60 hertz. Now we go back here, 50 to 60 hertz, how's that cope with where you're living? Apathy. You know, these kids that sit around watching TV all day, where do they sit, come out at the end of the afternoon? Yeah, okay, yeah. So 50, 60 hertz, apathy, grief, kids these days, or people, office workers and people struggling with things. That's why so many get out and train and do things, and it's great for them. So you've got, once again, back to the food lacking vitality, and we're all addressing that, and minerals, and that's why we're trying to grow better food and mineralise our food better. People, better soil, better compost, all that. That's why we're here. That's exactly where we're at with that stuff. Chemical exposure, well, that's pretty obvious. We all know what's going on there with some of these ones. Negative thoughts and energies, this gets back to your mindset. How do you live your life, what you go through? But if you're surrounded by grief and apathy and fear when you watch anything you see on mainstream media these days, I turned it on for 10 minutes the other day and I just, yeah, totally shocked. And
can I ask, are they outputting at a certain frequency as well though? Because I can't stand it. I can't.
Yeah, just the attitude and what they're telling you is.
Are they at an actual frequency?
So you got the TV producing that same hertz, but you also got what they're telling you is there's a frequency in what they're actually telling you, and creating with their words and back to words have power. They're creating these states, and like how much good is going on in the world, and everything you see on the news is negative. Like they drag these things up. As I was going to mention that every word we talk has a different meaning and a different emotion attached to it for every different person. Yeah. Like you're very on the swear word side of it. Yeah. Then other people don't worry about that. It's just an adjective, yeah. Right? And they just talk with it as an adjective. Yeah. But even if I asked everyone what family meant to them in this room, you'd all come up with different meanings. Like even tribe or family or love or compassion, everyone has a different meaning around words that's matched up with their journey and their upbringing and all that side of things. And that's why...
The way to see what words do is that you can speak to water, freeze it, and then look at it under a microscope.
Yeah.
If you say like hate to water, then freeze it. The like snowflake type thing that you look at is terrible. It's really chaotic. But if you do love, you get these beautiful, almost crop circle type.
And Margaret Richford's books got those. Yeah.
There's quite a bit of information out there about that sort of stuff. There's a couple of websites and they're doing some good stuff. So what we find is now you work through in your life and you'll work on different issues and you'll do different types of healing modalities, different energy healing, chiropractic, whatever you use is all working on different learnings in your life, right? So what we found with our work was we'd been doing a lot of healing for a long time, but our energy was still not lifting to the area we wanting it to lift to or get to. So what was holding us back? And it was the environmental atmosphere, the ambient energies that we live in that is actually creating a load that pressurises the body all the time. So once we understand that we can start working on these environmental stressors, esoteric type stuff, ground lines, all vaccines, just the whole ambient energy that we live in. Like back to the news, all that sort of stuff that you see, the houses and the things like that. Then you think about this for a second. Look, total love and respect, gratitude for people who went to war and things like that. But every year we have a ceremony. It's like a sculpture. It's granite, a lot of them are granite, which projects energy in a lot of the old field information and stuff. We go in there with grief and sadness, load that thing up, and it projects out over the environment for the whole year. So just something to think about. Now, if we go in there with peace and love and gratitude for what the people have sacrificed and gone through before us, it'll then project something totally different. But if we go in there with grief and you see these ceremonies where, and understandably there's people in grief about what's happened in life and what's happened before, but that is what that sucks in and puts out. So you think about how they're everywhere. Like, as I say, total respect for what people went through and things like that. But we need to have gratitude for what they've done, have a bit of peace in our heart, and acknowledge the fact, but not get tied up with the fear and the grief of what the experiences were. So it's just a thought, just food for thought. So originally, a couple of years ago, we made these basic tools, just something to carry on you, something to work on your food and water. So you put them under your food and water, and it helps get rid of those toxins we were talking about before, and energises it. The food and water one was set at 540 hertz, so it was set to actually help things regenerate themselves. And that card over there was originally set at 600 hertz. So in that peace and love sort of environment. And they were just set up, basic little tools to help with your personal space. So when you went somewhere, or EMFs, it was found that one there particularly drowns out EMF frequencies, like for phones and testing power boxes around TVs and things like that. So it's not stopping them, it's just drowning them out with a higher frequency, so they don't affect you near as much. So that's where we went, and we started to think, how can we look after our energy of our space better? And what do we need to do to fix that? So with our healing work, we'd identified lots of things in the environment and stresses that kept coming up over and over again. Like, I'll sit there and muscle test. I do something like 2,500 plans a year, and I was doing that for 10 or 15 years. So we're looking at a lot of data, a lot of statistics, a lot of stuff coming through generally, and what repeats itself and what keeps coming in as load. And it hasn't been able to, when you're working on a person, and fair enough, you are working on the environment around them, but you still have to work on the environment, because some of it, the person, you'll lift so far, but the environment doesn't support them. So you couldn't push the person too high or too quick, because the environment was a problem, or you try and do the environment and the person was a problem. So there's coaches around, well, it all comes from us. Well, yeah, most of it does, but there's a lot of hidden stuff we don't even understand that's happening in the background. So when you start looking at landscape and things like that, it's got the same problems as we're saying, Roundup, Don Huber sort of work, 22-year half-life in the soil. So it's affecting nutrient cycling through the soil for 22 years after it reaches, and my testing showed me after 4 litres to the hectare on country, half-life then really kicks in, and it's 22 years half-life. Now Ian's product, fantastic, he can break it down a lot quicker than that. But if you think about where most of our food's growing now, how many litres of Roundup's been sprayed over the last 45 years since it was developed, and how much change that would have made, and how long is that going to be before it releases from the system? We do release it energetically by matching frequencies and clearing it out in a different process, and we've had some pretty good success with that. And it doesn't matter whether it's a bacteria or 2,4-D, 2,4,5-T, all coming through generational. We've had little girls we've worked on with behaviour problems, and it was DDT poisoning. Now her grandmother had worked on the Tighe, and she'd never been near the Tighe. That was 30 years before she was even conceived, sort of thing. We've had another young fella at one stage had emotional trauma issues that was a problem, and one of the first remedies that came up for him was a clomide, which was a fertility medication. I was talking to his father, and he said, "I'm not sure where this has come from." We put it in there. His mother was on it to conceive him for fertility medication. Now that was still affecting him in his physical life at 21, right? And his attitude. So the load, some of this load we're talking about is coming through generationally, chemically, food, whatever it's come from. And it wouldn't matter how much healing work you did or self-reflection or looking at things and going through things, you still never would have identified that was there. So we've got to start looking deeper and looking, and that's why everyone's an individual. You never know what journey you've come from or where it's going. So how does it affect the land? Well, property and land's the same. What trauma's been on the land, what's happened in the environmental, these wagyus, like they're a prime example. We were managing a place at Radionics that we had a lot of full-blood wagyu cows. And the first year I was there, I got there in October, they were calving. We put 500 hours into those cows to keep calves alive, scours and ill thrift, and ended up, we worked with tuberculosis on them in the end to try and clear tuberculosis out of their lines. And we still lost 60% of the calves. That was November, December in Rathdowney in the heat and humidity. Calving time was all wrong, the big mess. We working with homeopathics at that stage and a bit of muscle testing, and early stages of muscle testing. The second year we still put a lot of hours into them, we lost 5% of the calves. And we couldn't change calving time that quickly. Now we'd do things different again, and we've grown. That was a few years back. So what about land? How's all these energies affecting land? So Kim was mentioning this earlier, the quality of life is governed by the quality of the questions we ask and the answers we seek. The only thing I'll add to that is we don't know what we don't know until we know we don't know it. So the answers we seek are is only as good as the information and the questions we ask. But if you don't know what questions to ask, how do you know to move forward? And how do we move forward? So when you sit there and look at stuff, as I say, I spend a fair bit of time thinking while I'm muscle testing about things and trying to contemplate how we can make things better. And it all comes from, we're all on a journey. How do you make things better? How do we improve the processes? And it might come from a conversation. Stay aware and alert. Someone will have a conversation with you across the room, and it'll trigger something to look at a different avenue down the track. We've all got to take responsibility for this learning and the growth and look and search, because it's not going to come to you on a silver platter, and nothing ever does. So that's just where I got to there. So once you get that idea that you're looking and searching and going on and on and on, you've got to work out how to measure things, right? How do we relate this knowledge we're learning? How do we decipher what's relevant to our journey and where we're at? So that's where we bring early stage stuff. We used to just muscle test for a long time. Just muscle test, just a simple yes, no, because that's all we needed with our healing work. That's all we needed. We were going through big pages of information, pendulum way too slow for what we're dealing with, and did that for years. But now as we've got a bit more further down the track, we're revisiting the pendulum a bit, and we're using this chart a lot, because you'll get a yes answer, and can I use this product? And it'll tell you yes. Ask how good is it for you? Of course you can use it, but it might only be a +1. Or you can use it, yes, you can use it, but how good is it for you? And it'll be bloody -4. Right? Start looking deeper and deeper into these questions and looking at, is there another product that's better? Is there some way around it? We've all got these tools available to us, and it's train your pendulum to work, use the basic tools. Because in life, will get you through when save you a lot of heartache in the long run, and get you through to deeper knowledge and deeper understanding. And we talk about the heart space, where I put probably a bit advanced, but yeah, I'll tell you a story about a bloke in a minute. But everyone comes from a different journey. Now, I did a public speaking thing probably 15, 20 years ago. And one of the things, they were talking about how to get into emotional states for different presentations. Right? And I was there, and I'm just a bushy and dog trainer or whatever. And I couldn't even comprehend what half these emotional states meant, never mind how to get into these emotional states to feel that, to project that. So not all of us are touchy-feely and emotional people. Some of us are more physical people, some of us are more intellectual people. So some of these concepts seem a bit stretchy and not stretchy, but just uncomfortable for where our knowledge and our point of time is. At least dowsing and the basics of dowsing can help you to understand those feelings, can help you to understand better, formulate better questions and look for deeper answers. So, can I use this product? Yes. Is it any good for me? Yes. Is there a better product in this range? Yes or no? If I did use it, what is it going to, how good? If you get a couple of yes, and you might still come up with a +7. Or if you're making a question or formulating a question, write it down then and see where that question will come up for the answer you're looking for. And if you might have, I'm trying to think of a question, but the question might be really basic, like repair, or you could be writing an intent to fix something, like repair or restore. And it might be regenerate, the word you need. And you go repair and it only comes up to there. And you think, oh, that's not a very good answer. So what word do I need to change? So test which word it is, and it might be then I'll restore, and it might come up to a +5. So then you can start modifying and updating your language and how you talk and how you project to get better and better answers. Does that make sense to people?
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Eric, do you think that the intent you have on that word that you're asking, it doesn't matter what the word is? Like whether you're saying regenerate or whether I'm saying rejuvenate or...
Yeah.
My intent is the same.
But it'll mean different thing to you. Even inside, even if your intent is that, and that's part of it for sure, but if you're writing it to then project it, or writing it to put it on the wall to look at it every time, you'll have an internal belief around that word that you may not be aware of. That's probably the word. So you'll say, oh, this feels right. Is it right? Question everything. Yeah. So people who use the pendulums and stuff, question everything. You've got the tool in front of you. You're using it. Take the time and make use of it, because that'll lead you to better and deeper knowledge, and better and deeper knowledge then will help you to learn how to lift your energies and develop those processes. Can save you a lot of time. Old knowledge revisited. So what we got to back here is, how do we fix our country? How do we project more. We were using basic tools. We can heal that by matching frequencies. We got to a point that unless the environment was running at a higher energy, clearing things was only clearing things. It only lifts, trying to develop energy from within only goes so far if you're not supported around that. So we asked some questions. So we started looking into old knowledge. What was used in the past? What has been around for a long time? What can be used? So we found these are Irish round towers. They're basically a paramagnetic earth tower in Ireland. Very old, this sort of stage. The point on them, there's a fair bit of discussion around whether it's been put on later or whether it was on the original towers. What was in the landscape around those towers, animals and stock and people were healthier, right? So they had less health problems. There was no doctors around needed in those areas. So there was a fair bit to do with the paramagnetic powers of these towers to help with environment over a certain area. Back to, so they were doing a job. They were actually doing something and making changes. Now, how much of a change they were making back then might have changed to what it is now, because there's more stresses and different stresses now on that country. But if they've had less time needing industrial type processes to keep production well and keep stock well, whether they've probably held for longer than most things. The value, energy value around those towers now is probably very disappointing. I tested some the other day. But that was the original thought process behind it. So old knowledge, and it worked for them in time. Paramagnetic earth, like old founded buildings. They talk about electroculture and currents, and back in you go into the 1870s and all that sort of time, they used to use these spires to collect ether energy to put in their veggie gardens, right? So early stage sort of electroculture sort of principles. So, and then you see these windows, before they put glass in those windows, there used to be the air going through them would create frequencies of healing. So a lot of those old founded buildings, because I'm not sure whether they were originally churches or whether they were healing centres or what they were in original time, that actually emanated different frequencies. And there's work out there that shows that you put plates of sand or you put water in there and you can see the frequencies that they're emanating, and all these old symbols and all this sort of stuff is knowledge and technology that has been lost or converted or hidden or distorted, I suppose the word, for different reasons. And I don't know why, it just is. And the science and the information we see in history is back again to use that pendulum. Question everything. A lot of stuff back there that's been hidden. And look, I'm not a flat earther, but there's a lot of information that's been hidden away from everyone for a long, long, long time, that back to the times of technologies where they could cut rocks and they could do things like that. And
this will all come forward now. Now is the time for that hidden knowledge to come forward. People will find it impossible to hide.
Yeah, and I hope that's true, because there's a lot of this stuff, simple stuff, and even the spires. This one's and I purposely picked this one out because it didn't have a cross on it. Because I'm not sure whether the cross was put there to stop some of those flows or to help, to divert energy flows and functionality, or whether it was put there before when I originally built. Once again, it was founded. Because some of these buildings have been around a lot longer than science and bloody technology tells you. And the story around them has been built and built and built on each other. Like, we don't know what the original purpose was and what the original story was, the mud flood and all those sorts of things. Like, back to what you're saying, buildings built on top of each other. Doorways 12, 14 foot high, knuckle bones turning up overseas that are the size of a mini car, and shin bones and things like that. Like, there's a lot of information out there that there's a long way down to find and things, like different races that we've never been told about. Start digging and it's exciting to see where it could go and what's out there and what energies. And back to that old energies, you start testing. I was testing country here a while back, and 60,000 years since it was running at 30,000 hertz. And it's been on a downhill spiral ever since. Now that's just what I've found, and other people find other things, but imagine what your country can do if you're running at a decent level around it, sort of thing. What we've got now is just what's left over. I mentioned there a minute ago, Electroculture. They do these little spirals, put them in beside your plants, little copper spirals, different copper rods, tunnels with cording, a lot of electroculture stuff, small scale stuff where they'll run cables under the ground to transfer the ether energy, it's not electricity, ether energy into the underground surfaces, sort of thing. They put magnets on the end of them, they work on north-south accesses, getting some great results. There's some real good, cool stuff coming out of the electroculture world that's very interesting. But if you've got a tower that's 7 metres high, collecting ether energy and sticking it in the ground, you want to know where you're sticking it, because not all energies you amplify are going to be good. Not all environment, like you might be putting on a water thing that's down underground, you might be putting on an old burial site. So you've got to dig a little bit deeper than that. What other, like Ian, and he couldn't put his compost on a certain area of his pad that he probably diligently cleared and laid granite all over, and you couldn't do what you wanted to do with it because of earth energies and trauma and stuff in the landscape. So just because you're doing electroculture doesn't mean you're immune to testing and being able to design and shape. And the lady we work with worked on a feedlot for a little while, and they were having a huge number of dark cutters in the feedlot, and she changed that from about 40-50% dark cutters back to about 3% dark cutters, just with homeopathic and dark cutter just in meat. So setting the cattle up better through the feedlot system can give you a lot better outcomes out the other end, and it's back to using your energies you can. And part of, as I said a second ago, I think it was part of healing land is healing ourselves. And I'll give a story about a bloke in a minute that is in exactly that process at the present time. So formulating questions. Use these tools, work through them, get comfortable with them, have confidence, and if someone's laughing at you, just turn your back and walk away. Because it's your journey, it's not nothing to do with anyone else. Have confidence. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. They'll catch up one day. The electroculture world. Now, this brings into a point that I was thinking about. In the Hugh Lovell work and in some of these broadcasts and stuff, they say the ether doesn't come down under 7 feet. Now, they're putting these little twisted copper things this high in a pot on the ground and getting results. So where's ether? Ether's everywhere. So it doesn't stop at this level, it goes to ground level, and it works on everything at every level. So just through observation and start looking, like some of these old paradigms and some of the stuff we've been told in the past, like there's that many stories about homeopathics, or there's that many stories about energy healing, there's that many stories about different things to keep models hidden and trapped and stop people progressing and understanding and growing, to keep you in fear. Like, start testing some of these paradigms and start asking questions and where can you take it and what's going on. Everything's changing, like so many things in the homeopathic world that we've been in for so long that you can't do this. Well, we do it. You can't do that. Well, we've done it. We made and it's funny, I was on a site the other day that they've had the meditative proving, that's how they work out how remedies work, and they had done a meditative proving on glyphosate. Just came out, latest news. We made homeopathic version of glyphosate 14 years ago and been using it with great results in that time. Roundup is different to glyphosate because of the AMPA in it, which is the adjuvant, and it reacts in a different way. So it's not just the glyphosate, it's a Roundup, and every variation of that has a different effect on the body or the landscape. So waiting for science to catch up is just too slow. It's never going to catch up with us in this space. So anyway, you go into the radionics world, a lot of people have touched on that. Great tools, you've got to be managing them all the time. Field broadcasters, another type of radionics device that has its pros and its cons, and there's good sides and bad sides to it. Management and durability are probably the hardest things on that to understand. This is a tower we put in down at Wallabadar. It hasn't been in for that long. 2,500 acres this tower's on, so get away from the electroculture model, like we're working on big areas. Grazing, cropping, and stuck this tower in there, and I like to put them in by hand with the people that's there because it's a communal thing. We talk through the process and things like that. This is in a paddock where there's 40 heifers. Stuck that in there, and we went home, had some lunch, and Cathy and I was down there and we're driving home, and that rainbow came up that afternoon and sat over that tower for an hour and 18 minutes.
Oh, wow.
When we drove in that morning to put the tower up, Nancy's pretty in tune with things, and there's a set of song lines that run through where Aboriginal song lines go through, and they were humming that loud and clear that they'd been healed already.
Oh, wow.
And she's just blown away. So little things like that are happening nearly instantaneous of these towers going in. Now that's a bigger one. It's got back to the field broadcaster model. It's got below ground, above ground, so it can put out energies below, above, paramagnetic earth tower. So we've combined quite a few technologies. We've combined a bit of radionics technology in there, so it's got a broadcaster into it. So it's got 4 aspects of what we've seen before. And that's an adjustable tower, that one. So the next morning she went back out there, and you know what it's like. You put something in a paddock, doesn't matter whether a crowbar, a shovel or post hole digger. Cattle come from everywhere to rub over it and shit all over it and make a mess and whatever they need to do. Went back the next morning and sat there with 3 or 4 dogs and a neighbour and thing. Wasn't a fresh cow pat within about 300 metres of it. And the cattle watched us put it in. They were standing over on the ridge line just watching us, and they just never come to visit it. So the change in energy didn't attract them, it didn't detract them, they just didn't feel they needed to disturb it. And there's another lady that's got one in a house yard in a little Holden paddock sort of thing, and they put the cattle through there to graze and stuff. Throws feed out of a veggie garden over the fence for them to clean up, right beside the tower, from here to that little one there. And cattle have never rubbed on it. So that they know it's doing good. And the other thing that's changed, got a testimonial just the other day back from her early stage stuff, the cattle behaviour changes. They just settle, the whole energy of how the herd moves, how they wean the calves, they're weaning calves, how the calves settled in the yards. Like just behavioural sort of stuff, well before production, so just early stage stuff. And yeah, no, really excited about how they're going. So yeah, Universe, it's got the Dowsing, paramagnetic electroculture, radionics, principles from the field broadcaster. 20 years of our experience, we making ferments and making homeopathic version of different ferments at the moment. On our place it's running really high, so they got getting some real good results with them. It needed to be portable. We got a little different sizes. We put one in, Sunday we came up. We put one in a daycare centre up here in South Tweed in the just a little house block one. And Cathy got a photo last night of these kids just standing around this little tower in South thing. Sent one to Cairns. We can post these little ones for house blocks, and sent one up to Cairns, and his daughter, it turned up in the house. He had it laying on the table the night before he rang me, because I'll position it for him. And his daughter climbed up and lay down beside it on the table and said, "It feels so peaceful here." And we put it in, and it's lifted huge energies and gathered and healing, because they've got some of the knowledge that we've gathered in 20 years working on things alerts us to what we need to work on in that landscape and what we need to be fixing and lifting energies to make it work. So that one up there, he's got crystals that he saves, his mate saves from the mines, and brings all these big quartz crystals in and puts there like a sacred spot for these crystals to come back to be safe. And his trees are going a lot better. So we've got years of research and experience. We got into these towers. Little travel buddy, he's got a whole story around that fella too. And this is the one we put in at home early in the piece. So that's where our little kaffir lime leaves were when we put it in. That was 3 weeks later. And that was about 2 months later. Right, so you can see it's making a change. And just, as I say, early stage stuff, lot of things happening on people's places that are unthings. That's this lime tree here. When we first put it in, it had a small crop of limes on it. We put it in that tower of ours, and it flowered again within a few days. And then it sort of stopped and stalled. And we changed, I had liquid in it, liquid in my tower, liquid ferments. So I changed that to pileal form, and it flowered again going into winter. And there were still flowers on the other day at -6, and it's still flowering and still going on. We've got mineral deficiencies like you wouldn't believe. We're not very good gardeners. We know how to work with energy, but we're not good gardeners. So we've got to talk to the composting and the minerals and things like that to fix that. I'll admit that. I'm probably the worst gardener in the world, but little blueberry bushes are going crazy. But these are just some things we're seeing at home. The lawn is still probably the colour of this poster now, and we've had -5s and -6s, and it's basically kikuyu lawn. So it's holding on well through what's going on by having high energy. Back to what Peter said, this is his 432. Yeah, I told you to find it. See, this is 432 as a frequency, and the lights and the harmonic that's around it. There's 440, what it's doing. Chaos. So and the big thing about that is every organ is working on every other note around that, not only what that's functioning at. So and where we come to with a lot of this stuff is, if you've got an environment that is running nice and high, and measure it, don't just presume, don't just ask, measure what environment's running at. Get into a habit of, because we assume too much. We assume we're being healed, so our energy's lifting. We need to measure it. Find out can we lift it, or where is it running? Because if you're running at 200 hertz and the environment running at 50 hertz, you're not going to get to where you need to be to this high levels that we're talking about. There's been too many things put in practice and in processes to keep us at a low energy for so long. And the environment needs recovering and things like that. And I was talking to one place I put a tower in, and it was, I put it in, and it was 1.5 km from this bloke's house. And you could feel like the tower just started working. We'd done other energy work there before and plans and things like that. And you could feel it was just buzzing. You could feel it buzzing up the back of your neck and there. And they drove back, and they had a smoke and some kombucha or something. And he said the smoke tasted terrible, and the kombucha it tasted totally different within 10 minutes sort of thing. So that's telling him something. 2 days later, he had calves in the yard being weaned. They went quiet virtually instantly. 2 days later, I went out to move the cows that needed to be moved, and they running up the paddock kicking and bucking and playing in a dry autumn in New England. Like, just behavioural things are changing. And I went out only 2 weeks ago, we went out, he's got a grain place out near Mungandai, we put one in out there for him the other day. And he's with a personal coach, and they're all saying, the tower is you've got to emanate these energies to be able to do your environment, heal yourself before you can heal your environment. And he could never feel the emotions around what she was trying to say. But after he got the energy around him lifted, he could then feel the emotion. So if you go right back to the start, and what I mean by this, way back here, so they say you feel your emotion, right, and that's where you'll run. We've proved that doesn't always happen. You can feel that emotion, joy, for half an hour a day, but if the rest of the environment's running at 50, you're never going to get to 500, right? But if your environment's running at 500, you actually emanate joy and you don't have to force it out from within. It is just you and how you think. And over the last 4 years with us doing, because we've consciously made with our healing work to lift energies as we heal. So it's not only heal, what energy are they running at when we're testing? Can we lift that energy at that point of time and lift it to the next level, or where can we lift it to? And you'll hear people speak, change, and how they talk and what they talk about will change because you've lifted their energy, not because you've asked them to talk differently, because where they're living is what they express. That's where they're living is what they express, and that is a big difference. And it's not just your thoughts make the energy, it's actually where your state is.
So are you buzzing now that you've got the tower on your property?
The first night we put it in there without a driver, it was one very interesting night. The first, like, we guinea pig on ourselves all the time, and yeah, no, at different times as we've been lifting our own energy, like when we first started being consciously aware to lift energy, there's nights there that you just sat in the bed and shook, just buzzed. Like, and there is a bit of a natural saviour in the system. Like, they talk about frequency fences. So as you lift energy, you'll get to the next layer of issues or next layer of stuff to deal with, right? Once you deal with that, you can lift again. So back to the healing, the journey of healing, you're always looking to grow and expand and get to the next level. But we'd done so much healing work at the start, when we decided we could lift energy, we had no boundaries. So that's why those cards are only 600 hertz at the start there, because we had no boundaries. We lifted ourselves to 600 hertz, which was a big lift, and it happened instantly. So we're like catching up.
Crystals will lift energies too.
Crystals will lift energies in a different environments, yes.
Right, I just going to use Ian here. I said, Ian, I've put some of your crystals on the other things I've done
Yep,
in the microbes, spread across the paddock,
yep,
come home shaking like a, I don't know how to describe it.
yep,
Bring a mate, lives in Tasmania. Really good psychic, but bang, told me exactly where I drove over something.
yep. Yeah, no, crystals will lift energy, and that's,
The crystals will lift it.
yeah, yep, for sure. And they all, a lot of the crystals will, I think there's charts out there that will tell you what different crystals are vibrating at. This one's, it's got an intent impregnated in a drive in there. And it, we make our own. Yeah, yeah. Nah. And even the copper, don't trust you're getting clean copper. You clear all that out before you start. Yeah, so there's a lot of these things we're bringing in another layer into the radionic towers, another layer into all that sort of stuff. And you've got to get more precise. A lot of people didn't know about this lifting energy, like they just expect it to just change. Always remember, energy precedes matter, so energy will lift before you see physical changes. The first step to lift energy is to clear unforeseen blockages.
And that last bit, clear unforeseen blockage, that's where
Yeah,
don't.
you don't know what you don't know until you know you don't know it.
That's right. Yeah, we just want to lift energy, but we don't go on the last one because we're oblivious to it.
Yeah, you're oblivious. You don't know what's going on. And it's only because of all the 20 years that we've been playing around looking and trying to work out exactly what we need to do and what's going on that we've managed to be able to figure some of this out.
You also must ask permission, because just because there's an energy there doesn't mean it should be moved.
That's right.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And it's all in how you define things. Even and you can do that with an intent, but it's how you define that intent, beneficial, non-beneficial. And your wording, back to your wording around those intents. Define what you're trying to do. Even in the towers, I just define parasitic or detrimental plants or parasitic or detrimental energies. Because if you're running a property and there's 10,000 pigs, that's not going to be any good for anyone. So they're a detrimental animal that's causing problems on that landscape. So it's not just about lifting it just for this purpose. It's being holistic, ecological in the whole process. And as you say, there is beneficial energies there, and there's highly detrimental energies. And don't think just because a place is running at, I don't know, some figure 30,000 hertz that you're not going to be attacked by things. Our place is running real high, and if anyone comes, you're quite welcome to stay there for a few days. But we still had a poltergeist come through the other day and attached itself into the environment and just dragged the hell out of it, like scared the shit out of me. Right, so we cleared it on, moved it on when we worked out what was going on, but even at that sort of level of energy, there is load and problems that come back into the environment. So it's a constant thing to be working on, aware of, and working forward in the future. Travel buddy's another thing. We were a thing, but anyway, Martin's giving me the fingers. Any basic. All right, yeah. Well, we're travelling and we were up at Beachmont. Had a tower in the car to actually put up at Tanson's place, and we were there for the first 4 days. We had it in the car, and we didn't get to do the job until about the fourth day. And the whole energy around that is an Airbnb was real calm, settled, beautiful sort of place to be. And you think, oh, this is bloody fantastic. And then anyway, went and put the tower in. That night we could hardly sleep. The energy's just changed back to where it was, and for 3 days, the rest of the 3 days there were cold, and it was bloody awkward, and the energy was bloody terrible. So hence we built something that we carry and keep our own, a small space thing. It doesn't work on the ground. All the others work underground as well as above ground. But this one just works above ground and just continues to heal, repair, fix problems in the background. We don't have to think about it. It just happens. It's just, you can still keep focusing and doing things yourself, but this is ticking along in the background and we don't even know it's there. So that's basically where we come from. Enjoy the ride. Early days yet with what this stuff is, but I think it's got a lot of potential to help a lot of people.
I've reached for the mugs.
He's reached for the mugs. Any final questions before Martin turfs me out? Yeah, just something to think about.
Fantastic.
Yeah, thank you for having me.